Hi there. We're going to give this a shot. We're having some technical difficulties, which is causing us to start a little bit later and also me to worry that there might be some lag going on. So, anyway, we've got a couple more interviews for you guys tonight. I believe these are our last chunks of interviews. We might have a couple more in the upcoming weeks. We were supposed to have an interview with Mr. Preston Adams and technically myself, but Preston and I's schedule did not cooperate in this last week to make that happen. So maybe we can get that going next week. And I believe we've had all the other authors, but I need to double check if there's anybody who didn't sign up for a time to interview. So anyway, the first one that we're starting with today is I believe with our Michael and Jeff, who wrote Foodies, which will be a part of this showcase. So just a couple quick reminders that support us by donating via Venmo. You can also join our Patreon. We are posting stuff on there that is exclusive to our Patreon. So even if you follow Wellspring or myself on Instagram, then there's other stuff on there that you wouldn't have gotten. You also have access to these interviews early. You also get VIP seating and access for the live performances in July. So there's some definitely cool perks. And also, if you are one of our first patrons, you get your name shouted out. And so far, I don't have anybody to shout out. So come join the fun. All right. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with Jeff and Michael. Enjoy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another interview. We have Jeff and Michael, the composer and writers for Foodies. Super stoked to have them here with us today. Why don't we go? Oh, go ahead. Oh, yes, Jeff.
I'm Jeff, and he's Michael.
There you go. I was going to say, why don't you guys go ahead and start by telling us a little bit about yourselves, and you can actually introduce who's who.
After you, sir.
About me, so I'm mostly a musician. Got a degree back in the 70s from UCLA and worked as a road musician and then worked in movies, mostly sound editing and mixing. And now I'm in Cambria, still doing music. You mentioned teaching. I just ended teaching yesterday. It was the last day I was subbing for a teacher.
God bless you.
And then I actually played graduation.
Awesome.
And it's
Very
unusual because there's only 32 students. They have bios for every student.
That's
So
awesome.
this is the first year I actually played underneath all the bios.
That's a really cool addition. My school's also really tiny, but we've never done anything like that. Our graduating classes are like 20 to 32. But that's really special. How cool. I love it. Thanks for sharing.
So I'm Michael Kaplan. In my 20s, I worked in Hollywood for about a decade as a comedy writer. Lots of ups and downs, 2 writer strikes, plenty of war wounds and battle scars. And eventually I escaped and moved to the central coast of California, San Luis Obispo County. I've done all kinds of freelance writing in my life and then eventually found myself in the nonprofit sector. I was doing grant writing for lots of different nonprofits in the area. Now I work full time as the community engagement director for a large nonprofit that does behavioral health services. And about 6 years ago, I decided that I always wanted to try and write a musical. And I worked on one, and I do not write music. So that was a handicap. And at a certain point, I realized I needed to find a partner to work with. And on the first show, I found a local musician, a jazz pianist to work with. And then I wrote Foodies and was introduced to Jeff. And that's how we ended up working on this particular project together.
That's so cool. I love it. And I love Slow. It's one of my favorite parts of California. My husband and I honeymooned there.
Oh, how wonderful. Yeah, no, it's absolutely a fantastic place to live. I love the pace. I love the just the low pulse rate.
Yes, no, Slow is beautiful. It's also very similar, like similar vibe to Denver, but like Denver with a beach, and it brings me joy. Um,
Yeah.
yes. Next question I have for you is just tell us about your show. Tell us about Foodies.
Foodies is it's a very farcical musical comedy. It is set at a food and wine festival in the city of Paso Robles, which is also in San Luis Obispo County. It's sort of one of the new wine capitals of California. And it's a story that's full of mistaken identities and some really silly mix ups. But at the heart of it are three characters who are all like in their 40s and desperately want a meaningful second act in their lives. And in the course of all of these mix ups, they, until they straighten them out, they just find each other validating one another emotionally in a way that they've never felt before. So, you know, they're making these emotional bonds despite the fact that they're not really who they think they are. And so that's kind of the engine of the show.
Very cool. I would say, Jeff, do you want to add anything, or you?
Well, I let Michael do the talking because he's really the
That's
parent of the whole thing.
totally fine. No worries. So the next question I ask is basically like, why is the show important? And I ask this question even for like fun piece of candy shows. I think there can always be like a bigger meaning or another like reason that this matters. And I, especially with this one, like it'd be fun to know what your take on the why is the show important.
Jeff, do you think there's anything important in what we're doing?
It's pure entertainment.
Well, and I think pure entertainment is important after 15 months of lockdown. I think that people would really like to tap their toes. And I think our songs are wonderful and very melodic and very hummable. And again, I think that they want to laugh. I mean, for me, what I was talking about with characters who are hoping for a meaningful or a validating second act in life, we're all going to have those moments in our lives. We don't do a lot of heaviness around it, but it is there to keep it from being a total cartoon. But I just think it's important to have some real entertainment right now that's fun.
I agree. Yes, sometimes it can just be fun. And fun matters for sure. It's a very sweet, it's hilarious. We had a lot of fun reading it at our table read. So then my next question for you is, what are the next steps or your hopes or wishes for this piece?
Well, I'm going to enter it in the Colorado New Musical Festival, so fingers crossed. Okay.
That's
Um, you know, we Jeff and I made a standalone podcast that's just under an hour, and it's like a Spark Notes version of a musical comedy. It crams 10 songs and sort of as much story as we could put in there and narrate. And first and foremost, it's like a marketing tool for us to try and get theaters around the country interested in it. But it's also really, really fun to listen to. If your audience were to Google Foodies and abbreviated musical, you will be led right to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible. It's all out there.
awesome.
Um, we both are dying to see the whole thing play
Yeah.
on stage, see what that looks like, and also figure out what we need to cut.
What
Yeah,
I
no, I feel that. I feel that for sure. Yeah, no, that's one of the most valuable things. And so, yeah, that's one of the hopes with like the showcase because yeah, we get all these wonderful stories and like, we're able to kind of put up and I don't know how we wound up with like 3 nights, but we're able to do these 3 nights. And so we do, two main stage shows, but there's so many good stories. I'm like, I at least have to share a little bit of it in the hope that, somebody sees it and is like, oh, that could be really fun. And that's kind of the hope. I also learned recently, I can't remember if Foodies would be high school appropriate, but there is like a new digital format licensing company that's like looking for submissions for stuff that is like high school appropriate and it's like geared toward high school directors, which I thought was super cool. Especially I'm like, I know a bunch of people writing new shows. Like so yeah,
You
I
know,
can't quite
I
remember,
think
but
I think I came across their website recently. We drop a few f bombs in this show. Only one is woven into a song,
yeah.
but I'm sure if needs be, we could pull them out.
Well, in some high schools, it's just a case of like the high school is okay with it, and then others just you have like a stanza that says if you're a high school, it needs to cut them, cut them. Like, that's definitely doable. Yeah, because the story itself is perfectly appropriate and way fun, and I think would be fun in a high school setting, personally. But anyway, that was kind of a tangent. But yeah, that certainly is the hope to see it on stage and see what needs to be adjusted and cut and all that kind of stuff. I feel that. So what inspired your show? Where did this come from? Where did this wonderful nugget of an idea spring forth from?
Well, the vogue right now is to adapt movies into musicals, and so I thought I would be really efficient and adapt a movie that never got produced into a musical. Um, this is sort of based on a screenplay that I wrote 10 years ago. And when I talk about how there's mistaken identities, at the heart of the mistaken identities is that you have a character who is like the world's pickiest eater, and he is mistaken for the keynote speaker at a food and wine festival, which means wherever he walks, people want him to taste their heirloom tomato bruschetta, and any concoction that they've had, the tomato meringue, it all grosses him out. And and yet he's trying to sort of walk this tightrope without being discovered. That was based on a couple of people I knew. My son, growing up, was one of the pickiest eaters I ever encountered. Now he's just completely open, will eat anything. And then likewise, my best friend in college, it was all cheese pizza, Stouffer's macaroni and cheese, or cheeseburgers with nothing on them. And that was basically all he could tolerate. So I don't know, somehow I just got it started with that. I wrote the screenplay. I never sold it, and then at one point it occurred to me, it's actually a story that would work for a musical. And so, I took it to Jeff and I handed off like these MP3s of me singing a cappella horribly, and he proceeded to make incredible musical sense of it.
That's awesome. Well, and that brings us to our next question of like, what did your writing process look like? How'd that go for you guys?
Actually, I like it because, well, and Michael's improved over the years, but he's not always real accurate on what notes. So I listen to it and then I pretend to read his mind. And whatever I have come up with, he says, yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. That's it. Yeah. So can't complain.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few times when Jeff said, "Well, you started in this key and you ended up in South America," and it's like, yeah, okay, I know. I have been taking singing lessons for the last year. I can only hope that if we do another show, just the road will be a little better paved for him. But yeah, I mean, above all, he's being modest. He would basically come to me and say, "Okay, your bridge is basically exactly the same as the lyric. Why don't we do this instead?" And it would be, "Oh my God, that's so much better." I mean, Jeff has a musical background. He could not only make sense of what I was wanting to do, but then he would just take it, 5 stories higher.
Yeah, things happen to like, I think in this town you had the list of things
Hmm.
and he just did the list over and over again. And there was a melody, so I established that melody, but I said, well, let's go up a half step. Let's go up another half step
Yeah.
for all the musicians out there to make it more interesting. And then let's go back to the original key because that's the better key for the lead singer we were using.
Well, and then you said let's do the whole section where they're singing "Pass a rope, please, we're in Pass a rope," which is great. But I mean that was nowhere in the original conception.
That's awesome. No, I love that. And I love that you've been taking singing lessons and that you just,
Oh,
even if you weren't like the most confident in your singing, you still sent the voice memos. I think that's awesome. I love it.
but
That's wonderful.
the main thing that would happen is that we would work in our silos. I mean, I had written the whole script even before I had met Jeff, and
Hmm.
then I would you know record a song a cappella, hand it off to him. He would work on it on his end. Then he would send me something. At some point we would get together at his studio in Cambria, But most of the time, it was just sort of that seamless, Dropbox method that was working pretty well for us.
That's awesome. And how did you guys meet? I don't know if we caught that.
I one of the things that I like to do in this area are like monthly storytelling festivals,
Oh,
and
cool.
so one of the organizers of these festivals had directed musicals at the high school in Cambria, and I ran into him at a holiday party, and I just said, can you recommend anybody that that might be interested in working on this musical with me?" And he immediately gave me Jeff's name. And fortunately, Jeff had seen the previous musical and liked it enough to say, "Okay, sure, I'll take a look at what you've got." But that's how it was. We had somebody broker an introduction.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. That's one of the things that I love hearing in these interviews is like how many people just like put it into the universe. Like I need a composer or I need a writer, like, and matches made in heaven happen. And it's really cool. I love
I
that. I think that's
Yeah.
great. That's awesome.
I don't know if it
Um,
was,
What's
I
that?
don't know if it was coincidence, but in fact, I had played shows with this other composer, so we knew each other very well.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and apparently he,
So
he
we
did not badmouth me so much that Jeff was scared off. So.
still
That's helpful. I'm glad you guys found each other. That's wonderful. So the last question I have for you guys is just what encouragement you would give other writers, considering like our festival is about like encouraging people to write and lifting up voices, and it doesn't matter where you are in the process, let's get something on its feet, that kind of thing. So what encouragement would you give folks?
Well, that was all great what you just said. But I'll defer to Jeff because he's the teacher.
but I don't teach that.
Oh,
Here's the
okay.
encouragement on writing musicals.
All right.
Just do it. Be creative, take the biggest crazy chances, and then if you have to back off from that chance, that's how creativity works, I think.
Yeah. Single biggest cliche is also the single biggest truth, which is you will learn from your mistakes. You know, when I worked in Hollywood, I can't even remember who it was who said, "You want to know how to write a great script? Write six mediocre ones." And unfortunately, it's true. And you're going to end up writing songs that get you halfway there, and then you throw them out, or you reconfigure them, and then all of a sudden you have the first step that works. But so I guess the main thing is don't sit there with a blank page or a blank screen, frozen, thinking I will not commit myself until I know it's perfect. Nothing happens that way, I think. You
Agreed.
go barrel in, try stuff, throw it out, rework it, but absolutely get your hands dirty.
That's awesome. I love it. Wonderful. And I mean, we got through stuff pretty quick. Is there anything you guys would like to, final thoughts or anything you'd like to plug that you've got going on?
Final thoughts. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm so excited that you're doing this festival, and that you're going to put our opening number on stage. Totally cool. Um, I hope that your audience will check out our podcast. Again, we're very very excited about it. We just think it plays like a cast album, and it's a lot of fun. Um, but boy, I don't know. I mean, it's just really nice uh, in my 60s to be doing something that I've only dreamed about doing for most of my life. And all that may come of it is that, we make stuff and we do it on the local level, but it's just a thrill and a joy to be able to work with Jeff and do things like this.
I love it. I think that's so great. I love it. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Creativity is satisfying. In fact, here's some background music.
All right, people, this is the Paso Robles Food and Wine Festival. You
That's
know what that
wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to see Foodies go up on July 12th with our showcase cast, and excited to see what else comes of it. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Fantastic, Kelly. Thanks so much. Really appreciate
Yes.
it.
Thank you. Video ended and snuck up on me. All right. That was a wonderful interview with those two lovely gentlemen. Such a joy to talk with them, and always love when other teachers are doing cool things. It brings me a lot of joy. So definitely was a cool opportunity to talk with them and get to know them and get to know their show. Foodies is so much fun. I'm so excited to do it. We started working on it in rehearsal the other day, and like, it's just a joy, and it's going to be so much fun. So we really hope that you'll come join us on July 12th. That's coming up real soon. Very exciting. So we will see you then. We've got one more interview for you tonight. From the crew that did Rockey Mountain High, which is one of our main stage shows. That one is happening on the 19th of July, so our middle Monday. So mark your calendars for that one. And it's being directed by Mary Wilkie and Patrice LeBlanc, written by a whole crew of wonderful humans, most of which were in this interview. So it's a fun story about a fun show with a mother and son who conceived the idea, and that just brings me joy. And it's also about a school, so that also makes me giggle, and I always enjoy that. Another couple reminders: if you want to support the work that we're doing, you can go ahead and make donations via Venmo. I believe the handle is not there, but it's on, I think, our ending card. But it's at CO New Musical Fest. And then if you'd like to get some VIP seating or access to some cool online stuff, join our Patreon. It's really cheap and benefits awesome authors and writers and artists, especially coming out of COVID. Please support the cool work that we're doing. We'd love to have you over there. We're also doing a GoFundMe right now, because we have so many stories and artists and people involved in the festival that identify in the LGBTQIA plus rainbow. We're doing a Pride GoFundMe that is up there right now. So actually, if you search like CO Musical Fest in GoFundMe, you'll find it. It's also posted on all of our social media. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and watch our interview with the team from Rockey Mountain High. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another interview. This time I have the wonderful crew from Rockey Mountain High. Super stoked to have them here. This is one of our main stage productions happening, I believe, on the 19th, so the middle date. Super excited to have them here. So let's go ahead and get started, and why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves? Whoever would like to start.
Who's going to start? Alphabetically, he's...
Yeah. Well, hi, my name is Cooper. I'm a college student right now. I've had a passion for musical theater for quite a very long time. And it's grown since writing this show.
Awesome. I'm Kia Cooper, and I've been a musical theater dweeb since I was a little kid. You know, right around when musicals first existed. Ha ha ha. Okay, I'm not that old, but Cooper likes to tell me I am. Love musical theater, love the process, and this is the first musical we've written.
Very cool.
And I'm Mark Hallman, and I guess I got into musicals when I was in my early teens, watching MGM musicals on TV in those days, and just figured out eventually by college that I wanted to start writing them. And I did start writing my first one just the fall after I got out of college. And that was 35 years ago. So here I am, still doing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And why don't you guys tell us a little bit about your show? You also could talk a little bit about how you all know each other and talk about your fourth partner who is not with us today.
Sure. So Cooper and I started writing the show the end of April 2017, based on this bizarre dream that I had, that we wrote a musical about a school that has a funding shortfall and decides to grow pot. Don't ask me where it came from. I have bizarre dreams all the time. We met our fourth partner, Drew, shortly after we began writing, and he composed the first couple of songs for us. And then he was pulled to another assignment, and we had the great good fortune of getting in contact with Mark, who we love and adore, and is fabulously and amazingly talented, as you know from Urinetown and his other work. So that was just a fortunate happenstance. And we met Mark 2 years ago.
Yeah, a little over 2. And tell how. I mean, on my end, it was that the best man at my wedding, which was 19 years ago, knew someone right?
Right. So Shauna Kelly, who's an editor here in town, is a friend of a friend, and she had edited a local Denver author's book. And I met Cynthia at a book club, and she said, "You know who you really ought to meet is Shauna."
She has a passion for musical theater.
She loves musical theater, and she did her thesis on Stephen Sondheim. So you've got to meet her. So I met her, and we were talking, and it was right around the time that Drew was pulled to a different project. And I said, "We're looking for a composer because we don't write music. We have the lyrics, we just don't have the music." So, and I off the cuff was like, "Oh yeah, so if you know anybody," because how many people know somebody who's amazing and talented who writes music? And she said, "As a matter of fact," and
we could get you a touch.
And she said, "Well, let me just see first." And then she got in touch with Mark, and he read the script, and
we hit it off. Yeah.
And he liked it, nice. and now here we are.
That's awesome. So Drew was involved at the beginning and then kind of like handed it off to Mark. Is that how that worked? That's cool. And how'd you guys meet Drew? Or I guess, how do you know him? How did he start with the project?
So
curious.
I didn't really know. It's going to get confusing because there are 2 Marks. The only other person who we had any connection to close to New York theater is the director, Mark Aceto, who is, once again, a friend of a friend through some sort of convoluted line. And so he had read the script, and he was really helping us, saying, "Here's, what makes a good song," some of the very, very basics of how to write shows. And so finally, once we had a draft that we were happy about, he said, I didn't want to ask, but it doesn't seem like you 2 are really musical people. You're the writers, you aren't the composers. And so he sort of reached out through a couple of friends to meet Drew, I think, from there.
Cool. That's awesome. And one of the fun things that has been like a thread through all of these interviews has been, people who are like, "I have a story and I've written it, but I don't write music," and just putting it into the universe and finding these wonderful partnerships with these amazing people and creating really cool art. And so I love that that's been like an unexpected thread through all of these, which is so fun. So that was kind of about you guys. Well, tell us about the show, or maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more on the show if you got anything. Show itself.
Sure. The show is silly and funny, we hope, and fun. We have been writing it for the last 4 years, and for right now, we love that we're getting to tell the story now. In particular, it's super timely. I think that pro education pieces, particularly at the high school and college level, are always really timely. But I think that right now, to have a show that is a total escape, where you can just get away from reality, it's certainly set in reality, but there's some things that are much larger than life. But to get into something that's real, that doesn't have anything particularly heavy in there, I think it's nice to laugh after all the sadness and depression and anxiety and stuff surrounded COVID for the last year and a half.
I think that's definitely the best way to sort of enter back into live performances is via laughter.
For sure. And that, I think that speaks to the next question I have is like, why is it important? Anything else you want to add to that? That was very well said. Piece of candy is always fun and important.
Well, and I think that it's definitely a confectionery type of show. There are some messages that have meaning. So we like that it's not completely candy, but it has a very thick candy coating.
It's like the nuggety center is the meaty fun bits of pro education and things like that. Now, I'm a teacher, so of course when I read it, I was like, yes. I feel this on a deep personal level.
Excellent.
That's awesome. So the next question I have, or Mark, is there anything you want to add to about the show or about the music, why it's important, things like that?
I mean, yes, the show is funny. I mean, that's the reason I'm doing it. I read it, I thought, this is hilarious. These characters are outrageous. And Kia and Cooper are not afraid to go there, in whatever case. I mean, comedically. So that's why I was drawn to working on it. And for sure, this is the right time to do it.
Awesome. That's so great. I love it. So then what are the next steps? What do you guys want for the next place or the next things for your show? What are your hopes for the future?
Yeah, well, I think we would love to have another festival reading. We'll learn a lot by having it in your festival and getting to see it in front of an audience. And I would think we would have lots of ideas for rewrites after that, and then would want to test it at another festival or other situation where we can have a reading. But that's my take. Kia and Cooper, what do you think?
I think we predominantly agree. I feel like this year was sort of iffy with COVID messing up all kinds of plans. So it's mainly a matter. I think this is a promise the developmental side of things, even if this past year was all over the place. And so my hope is that now that things are back to normal, we can sort of hopefully chart a normal progression upwards.
Yeah, we'd love the festival, online or live. Would love university sort of setting, whether it's for a workshop or a reading or a full production, would be amazing and fantastic. Small regional theater, any of those, we just look forward to progressing and moving forward as the word gets out.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think this is a show that definitely could lend itself to a lot of different places. And again, as a teacher, I'm always thinking about like, what can you do in high school? What could you do in college? Like, where does that go? Where does that fit? So no, I definitely think there's a lot of parallels there. Some schools might have issues with the pot thing. I wouldn't. I think it's hilarious. But I think it's definitely doable in a lot of places, which is really cool. And I think you kind of talked about this a little bit, but what inspired the show was your dream. Is there any other pieces of it that maybe like triggered you to write it, or how it went from maybe being a dream to I have to write this into a musical?
I think that was the kind of the main thing. I woke up at like 3:00 in the morning, went running down to Cooper's room, and I said, I had this dream.
We're gonna do it.
We're gonna do this. I had this dream, and we're gonna write a musical, and it's about this school, and it raises money because it loses its budget, and it raises money by growing pot. And as non-smokers and non-users, I have seriously zero idea where that came from. And I said, and it's gonna go to Broadway. It's gonna happen. It is gonna happen, and we're gonna start on it. And he just,
well, I'm not a morning person, so that sort of came out of the blue for me. I had to listen when it got closer to midday. But I think in terms of how things tweaked, I definitely had a few different ideas that she did. So I think it's always a matter of finding compromise. And so I think her idea of what originally she dreamed about, and I'm sure what this show is right now, are completely different things. But I think a lot of come from finding almost either real world sort of funny stories. Like I think as we were writing about this school, I was in high school at the time, and I feel like it might not have been intentional, but it was sort of in many ways mirroring the high school that I went to in some cases. Sort of like I think that just happens when you're writing about a place that you might know very well.
For sure. That's awesome. No, I love it. I don't know, anything you want to add to that, Mark? Any inspirations for the musical pieces of it, or like what triggered some of the musical ideas? Or you can even speak about like taking over a creative style after someone started. That could be interesting.
Oh, that's a good question, because I at the beginning, I insisted on not hearing Drew's music because I wanted not to be influenced by it or hear it and then fall into the trap of duplicating it, either consciously or unconsciously. So I feel like it was the longest time before I allowed Kia and Cooper to play me something from the show.
It was the first.
Yeah.
Like it was after the vast majority of the music had even been done that we ended up showing.
Right.
We recorded the stuff from Drew, so we had it, and when we were sitting at the table read, we played it for the first time. It was the first time the cast, the people that we had gotten together for the reading, it was the first time they had heard it, and it was the first time Mark had heard it too. So
that's right.
Wow, he's listening really carefully. What's up with so
right. Yeah, and it's all terrific. After I heard it, I thought, I don't want to lose any of this if we don't have to. So I'm so pleased that we have Drew's songs. I hope my work is able to complement it and that it all works as a whole. I mean, that's the goal. I hope the whole thing works as a whole. We'll start finding that out with this process in Colorado.
Very cool. No, that's fascinating. Because that would be my number one thing is like, I'm not sure if I would how I would approach that if somebody had started something and I was taking it on, like whether I would want to be informed by that or just be like, no, I'm just going to go for it. We'll see what happens. We'll adjust later. So that's a really cool way to approach it. I love it.
Yeah, Mark did a great job.
That's awesome. Very cool. I'm excited to hear it too. That'll be really, really cool. So then what did the writing process look like for you guys? So looks like book got written and then music, or what did the collaboration piece look like? Talk a little bit about your writing process.
It definitely started, I think we had basically a rough draft of the entire script before we even reached out for music. And I know that whole rough draft was written by a method of just bickering back and forth. And her saying, I think it should be this. And me going, I don't know how I feel about that. And then I would come up with something and then she wouldn't like that. And so we would eventually either just give up from arguing and then circle back later, or we would find some way to compromise into something that worked for both of us.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I usually start it. I'm the instigator, and Cooper is the voice of common sense.
I hate to say.
Yeah, I'm the way out there person. I'm like, okay, so what if we have this car and we can get Smart Car to sponsor it, and this car is going to be hanging from the roof, and this guy's going to be dangling, and Cooper's like, okay,
that's just not realistic.
In real life, what if we did? Yeah, there's kind of, as poor Mark has had to witness, there's a lot of back and forth and debate on basically every word in the script and in the lyrics. But it all works out, and I think it's great to have someone who kind of brings me down to earth and yet brings him up, okay, at least to shoulder level, so that when we kind of meet in the middle, it seems like it turns out to be a much better product than if either one of us had done it by ourselves. And then we have Mark, who comes in, and because we are not necessarily music people, Mark comes in and adds his brilliance and amazingness. And I think having 3/4 minds when you count Drew, it makes for a much better product than if we just kind of had this one track and we were by ourselves. Well, because we don't have a lot of those talents like Mark does and Drew does. So it's fun. Sometimes it's a little bit nerve-wracking when I tend to be very married to something. As soon as I come up with it, I'm like, oh, this is it. This is what it's going to be. And then I find out, obviously, that's not actually. I
work extra hard to sort of say, no, we got it.
No. So it ends up being a great process, even though sometimes we're kind of like, okay, I have to listen. So it's been fun.
Nice. Thoughts on the music side of it? Like, what did that look like for you guys? For you, Mark?
Yeah, I usually write both music and lyrics. Very often I will co-write lyrics with the book writer, and I don't very often just set other people's lyrics. So, when I first started on the project, yeah, that was what I saw, a full libretto with the lyrics of music. Some of them I knew had been set by Drew, and then others were my job. And so that was, always using character and situation as an inspiration and jumping off point. I started starting to set the lyrics that I don't think I went in chronological order of the show. I just think I did what I usually do, which is try to find the one that's easiest. Go for the one that's easiest, and then go for the next easiest, or the next not hard one. That's pretty much how I feel my way through a score. And we had we had some back and forth where I hit upon a melody that I wanted to work for the lyrics that they had written. And sometimes a line had a couple more syllables than my music would allow for, or we needed to fill in for a couple more syllables because my line went longer than theirs did. So, we had that kind of back and forth, which was pretty, I don't know, on my end, pretty painless. I don't know how it felt for Kia and Cooper, but felt like we collaborated well, and got that, we got to where we were all happy about it. I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm curious to ask Kia and Cooper. So when you say this, when you had a whole script, is the script that Drew looked at also with you had all the lyrics in place, or were?
Yeah, we did the same thing, because I think we were the other Mark Esita, first Mark that we met, who was sort of helping us through the whole process. And so we got to a point where he sort of read through and he said, I don't really think there's much that you can add now from this draft until it's either put up in front of people. So you've been delaying it for long enough. You just got to get the music side on here at some point. So we might as well.
Well, in
Got
Drew's,
it.
I can say, Drew's process was the exact same as Mark's, which was, what's the easiest hit for me? And the easiest thing was, the I Want songs, the character songs. So that's where Drew started and had gotten through a few of those. And then when he left, Mark had a lot of the really difficult,
the really ambitious
pieces that were, the Marijuana Dream Ballet, spoiler alert.
It's like a 12-minute saga of music. It's definitely not like a short, easy thing to compose and then just sort of leave it. It's definitely a pretty big thing for Mark.
So Mark definitely had a lot of the heavy lifting that was left. And still a couple of fun character songs too. So
my favorite being Perfect Square, just a gorgeous set of lyrics for this character who basically compares, is it math? Is it all math terms, right? To love. Terrific. Just a joy to write. On my end, to react to it.
Yeah, it's my favorite song when we, a lot of stuff, like we get the music from Mark, and it's always such a great surprise because we have no idea how it's going to sound. And then Mark would send it and we'd be like, oh my gosh, okay, let's listen to it again. And then let's figure out what our favorite part is. And he sent a Perfect Square, and I was sitting there, just had like tears in my eyes. I'm like, this is the most beautiful thing ever. So I ended up calling Mark, like 4 minutes after he sent it to us. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this song. And still, you know, to this day, I listen to it, I won't say daily, but a lot. A lot. One of my
That's
favorites.
awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
my pleasure. And you know, but at the other end of that spectrum, on collaborators reacting to each other's material, you know, I think we've had a very healthy relationship in that Cooper and Kia also weren't afraid to tell me when I was on the wrong track, and that has, you know, it's got to happen among everybody. Everybody has to feel like they can say that to each other for something to work well. So we were blessed with that kind of back and forth and respect for each other all the way through.
Absolutely. Well, and I think to the greatest case in point is when we got the feedback, your adjudicators, Kelly, and they said, you know, hey, there are a lot of sort of enemies and this immigration piece that I was so dead set on. Oh my gosh, we have to have this. This is such an important part of this piece. We have to hear this voice. We have to hear Izzy's voice as this person who's pro-immigration, and we have to have this story. And then we got the feedback that was like, yeah, you know, this doesn't really fit with the rest of the show. And so Cooper and I kind of went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And what are we going to do? And what are we going to do? And we have to have an issue. And we started kind of throwing ideas to Mark and saying, well, could we write a song about this? And Mark would say, well, why don't you explore that? Which, thank heavens, that, you know, Mark kept being encouraging, because there were a few times that I was ready to throw the computer against the wall and say, we're not doing this. We're just going to do a song. But so we ended up coming up with this whole song, and we wrote it. We were really excited. Sent it to Mark, and Mark's like, you know, here's the thing. And he's absolutely right that she needs to have a reprise. And so we rewrote it as the reprise, and now it's way better than it would have been.
All these
you know,
things that we would never have thought of in the first place, and then all of a sudden we just, why did we think of that?
So,
it's Mark.
Yeah, we're grateful for the collaboration piece, especially with Mark. It's awesome.
That's super cool. And glad to hear that feedback was helpful from our adjudicators. That's always nice to hear. Because that's what we're very glad to hear that. That's awesome. I'm excited to see it happen. And then the last question I have for you guys is just, what encouragement would you give to other writers? Since our festival, kind of the focus is telling untold stories, or, you know, focusing on you know, marginalized voices and things like that. And actually, one thing that like I really loved about your story that we hadn't quite touched on is when you look at the casting call for it, and the just anybody but Caucasian, or, you know, it should be any ethnicity, you know, the goal should be a diverse cast. And like, I love that even in a piece of candy piece, right, it does have some meat to it, but like, it's something that is just a piece of joy, that you do have this, no, this is where theater's going, and this is important. It should not be all white faces on stage. And that's one of the things that like particularly struck me with kind of the mission of what we're trying to do with featuring new work. So anyway, that was slightly a tangent, but what encouragement would you guys give to other writers?
I feel like if I could say any one thing from our side, it's don't be afraid to write something down, even if you know you're going to change it later. Because we would get into these sort of feedback loops where we would just be very, very critical of what we would write, and then we just sort of not end up with anything at all. And we just sit there and we talk and talk and talk and have a lot of ideas for what the song needed to do, but nothing actually of substance. So just, even if you know it's not, write something down, and then you can always revise it to something that is, but don't sort of hold yourself to perfection at the very, very beginning of things, for sure.
Agree.
I love that. I'm still struggling with that very thing. Yeah, it can't be said enough to writers, I feel. And once you're finished with your piece and you've written it, my advice is get it up in front of people any way you can. I come from a tradition of when I was in my 20s of storefront theater, and that's really how I cut my teeth theatrically in my 20s, working with a small theater group where we would write and produce everything and act in everything. and clean, also clean the toilets. And we just did everything in a little 50-seat theater, and that was incredible. Just to be able to not wait on anybody else and just do the work in front of an audience and go on and learn from that.
It's very cool. Awesome. And then something I've been asking folks as kind of a final question. Is there anything you would like to plug or promote, or any cool stuff that you'd like to share with our audience? You don't have to, but if you have something, feel free.
How nice.
Or final thoughts is also something. But yeah, no, it's totally fine. Some folks did, but that's okay if you guys don't.
Well, I think we're really excited about July 19th.
Yeah.
And I am so excited to see Mary's reading of the show and see how it progresses, and just get tons and tons of feedback
In person.
from that in
Yeah.
person, yes, because it's absolutely critical to the process. So we're looking forward to that. I know Mark has many things
Yes.
on which he's working, and I look forward to all of them.
Yeah.
I adore him.
That'll be awesome. No, I'm super stoked for the 19th too. It'll be really fun. It's been fun finally having audiences again. I've been doing some stuff with small audiences, and I'm like, oh, people laugh. That's fun. Like, it's warming to hear. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, you're totally right, Kelly. I think this will be the first thing of mine that I will be seeing in front of a live audience, for more than, in more than a year and a half. I think that was the last thing I had in front of a live audience. I think I'm going to be in tears probably on the 19th, because just because of that.
Yeah, just hearing people react again, and like seeing the first show I got to do with an audience back actually was a show that I wrote music for, which is kind of fun and poetic. But it was really fun to see actors like feed off audience energy again, and like see how it was different from when they were just running it in tech. Like it was really cool. So it is fun to like see it be real again, not virtual. Awesome. Well, it was lovely to meet all of you. I am so excited to see you guys in person for the show and see your show come to life. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
you.
Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yes, thank you. Well, that is our final interview for the evening. We just have the two. We're working on the next chunks of interviews. So the next couple Mondays might be a little more sparse. We also might skip a Monday. But the festival will be up and happening starting July 12th, and then the 19th and the 26th. So mark your calendars and bring a lawn chair. And if you are not local to the Denver area, we will be taking the recordings from the live performance in the park, and we will be Twitch streaming them probably the day after. We'll probably do them on the Tuesdays following, or potentially later that evening. Still kind of have to work out when that's happening, but that's something to look forward to. And again, feel free to support us on our lovely Patreon. The link is down there, and we hope to see you guys at the shows coming in July. Thank you for your support of new works. Keep making art, my friends, because it matters.